So I've recently been binge watching Enterprise again, and I usually start with the last episode of season 2, The Expanse, which kicks off the Xindi arc, and then I work my way through seasons 3 and 4, and I think this is the best era of the show. Just two fantastic seasons, really well written. And if you give the Xindi arc a chance, it really builds, it's very worthwhile. Season 3 also has some great breakout episodes like Similitude, North Star, and Carpenter Street, the latter two offering a refreshing thematic, tonal, and visual departure over the average Enterprise episode. But I think arguably the season highlight and one of the series' best has got to be Twilight. It's also, I think, one of the best episodes of Star Trek. Not only does Twilight work as a standalone, but it fits neatly into the Xindi arc. Twilight has been described as being like this show's version of yesterday's Enterprise, but it's also a great character-driven episode. And if you haven't seen it, check it out before you watch the rest of this review, because I will be spoiling the entire thing. So the episode opens with a very epic opening sequence. Archer is in his quarters while Enterprise is chasing down the Xindi weapon, which is just about to reach Earth. And for some reason, he's confined to quarters and he doesn't know why. But anyway, he reaches the bridge where T'Pol is in command for some reason, and she orders that he be escorted back to his quarters. The weapon fires at Earth, completely destroying the planet. Archer is devastated. A shocking opening. After the opening credits, Archer wakes up in the future. He's aged. A total of 12 years have gone by. He has no memory of those missing years. He's in a home that he doesn't recognize, and an older T'Pol is in the kitchen. He's understandably confused by all of this. She explains that during an incident where the ship was struck by an anomaly, he saved her life, but he was infected with interspatial parasites, which left him unable to form new memories. It's kind of like Christopher Nolan's Memento. He can recall everything prior to the accident. T'Pol has had to explain the events of the last 12 years to Archer every single day since she began to be his full-time carer. Through flashbacks and T'Pol's narration, we see just how disastrous Enterprise's Xindi mission had become without Captain Archer in command. Phlox was unable to develop a cure as the parasites exist outside of normal space, so T'Pol was placed in command of Enterprise. Archer tried to contribute to the mission as best he could. T'Pol told him that his experience and wisdom would be of much use. However, in a briefing, it's shown just how impractical it is to continue to have Archer as part of the mission. Archer offers Trip some new engine specifications that he thinks might help to improve engine performance. However, he observes an awkward look between Trip and T'Pol, and he deduces that he must have already given them the engine specs. He can only retain memories for a few hours before reverting back to the time of the accident. And I really loved the pathos of all of this. Scott Bakula plays this very well. He becomes a tragic character, unable to learn, grow, and develop, and it opens up all kinds of questions about what it is to be a fully self-aware person. Archer's body is healthy, he's sane, he's corpus mentis, but his inability to make new memories, similarly to someone with Alzheimer's, is an especially cruel condition, and eventually leaves him little more than a passenger on his own ship. If you couldn't make new memories, eventually you'd get stuck like a robot in a feedback loop, having the same conversations, suggesting the same ideas, and making the same mistakes over and over without ever being able to learn from them. So anyway, after the Xindi destroyed Earth, they decided to go after every other remaining human colony and basically destroy humanity. However, a small convoy of Earth ships managed to make it to Ceti Alpha 5, and they dismantled some of the vessels and they built a new colony there, and there's only around 6,000 humans left. Archer is understandably devastated by this news, but in addition to that, the planet, Ceti Alpha 5, was chosen by the writer as a kind of a cruel joke. It's the planet where Kirk marooned Khan on in the episode Space Seed, and of course in Wrath of Khan, we found out that Ceti Alpha 6 would eventually explode, making Ceti Alpha 5 uninhabitable, so the future doesn't exactly look bright for this colony. Anyway, Phlox arrives, and he tells Archer that he finally has a cure for his condition, but the treatment requires the power of Enterprise warp core, so they return to the ship, which is now commanded by Trip. Archer has an emotional, poignant reunion with his old crew. They're all a good deal older now, of course. As T'Pol and Phlox begin the treatment, Enterprise prepares for an attack by the Xindi. After the first round of treatment, Phlox discovers that not only is it working, but much to his surprise, the parasites he removed are disappearing in past scans also, scans taken years ago, because they exist outside of normal space-time. So when you remove them in the present, they also disappear in the past. Trip shuts down the treatment, telling them that they need the engine power for the upcoming battle with the Xindi. Of course, his position is really silly because, as T'Pol and Phlox have explained, if they just continue with this treatment, then the parasites will never have infected Archer, thus meaning the mission would have probably taken a completely different direction, maybe even a better one, where Earth was saved, because Captain Archer would never have been compromised and the devastating series of events that followed his accident may never have occurred. But of course, in the interests of arbitrary tension and building a massive explosive conclusion, Trip denies their request and proceeds to battle with the Xindi, who eventually destroy the bridge and board the ship. The pod used for Archer's treatment is also damaged. Phlox and T'Pol are killed, but Archer manages to create a subspace explosion with the warp core, with one last effort despite being shot in the back. The ship explodes, destroying the parasites. Archer awakens in sickbay in the present, with the timeline restored. None of the future events ever took place. The ending is very reminiscent of the conclusions of episodes like Year of Hell and Timeless on Voyager, and with Archer getting shot in the back and struggling to push some vital controls with his last gasp effort, it's very similar also to how Suter died in Basics Part 2. In fact, Mike Sussman, the writer of Twilight, had originally intended this to be a Voyager episode, in which Janeway was the one infected and Chakotay had to take care of her. Ultimately, the story was always about unrequited love. In this case, the feelings that T'Pol had developed for Archer over the 12 years that she was looking after him. Obviously, because of his memory problems, he could never return these affections. The story worked far better as an Enterprise episode, especially given the epic intensity of the ongoing story arc, which made for a much more suitable backdrop for the story. This episode raises the stakes and ramps up the Xindi arc in a major way, offering lots of drama and demonstrating just how serious the Xindi threat truly was. And it's anchored by fantastic action sequences, great direction by Robert Duncan McNeill, and heartwarming performances from Scott Bakula and Jolene Blalock. Enterprise does get a bad rap because of its mediocre first 2 seasons, but Twilight was an example of just how good the show really could be. Enterprise was more than capable of producing some top-notch Star Trek.